morning, everyone. We are here in my shop, which is actually where I do a lot of my thinking and my devotions and listen to podcasts from my favorite Bible teachers and pastors. Because who am I kidding? You know I cannot make or fix much of anything, so I have to use this space for something. This is where I do a lot of my devotions and my studying. But I'm here today talking to you because I miss our time together in Sunday school. You'll remember that several months ago we went through the book of Habakkuk, where Habakkuk is asking God, how long is it going to be before you do something about this? Habakkuk feels like he's constantly pointing out to God that there's violence and suffering and injustice and persecution and all of this stuff that's happening, and it seems like God's not doing anything about it. And so he points it out to him and says, how long are you going to wait? How long do I have to keep pointing this out to you? And the Lord says to him, and Habakkuk's very fortunate that he gets a response in this way from the Lord, and where God says to him, look, I am doing something about it. If I told you, you wouldn't believe it. And he tells him anyway. He says that there is something coming. I'm going to be doing something about it. He even says, Habakkuk, write this down. This is how certain it is for what is coming. I'm going to bring judgment. I'm going to bring it in a way that is going to be surprising to you, but it is coming. And the Lord says to Habakkuk, those who are proud, those who have set themselves against God, those who are relying on their own strength and their own wisdom and their own power and their own perception of the circumstances, God says that in chapter 2, verse 17, that his soul is not right within him. For those who set themselves against God, there's something inside of them that is not right. But then he says, those who believe what I have said, those who believe enough in who I am and in my character, that I am not just sitting on my hands, those who believe that God can and will do what he has said and promised to do in such a way that they then resolve to act on it, for those who have that kind of belief, it is given to them as righteousness. And God says to him that those who are righteous by this kind of faith will live, will have, they will survive this coming judgment on all that is troubling Habakkuk in this world. That verse, Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, I think I said verse 17 earlier, Habakkuk 2:4, is used 3 times in the New Testament. First, in the book of Romans, in chapter 1, verse 17, where Paul is making the argument that the righteousness that we have before God in the gospel is not a righteousness of our own. In fact, he says that in the gospel, the righteousness which we need to stand before God is revealed to us. And then he quotes Habakkuk 2:4. Then it's also quoted again in Galatians chapter 3, verse 11, in Paul's discussion of how the use of the law is not going to give us the standing before God that we need, that instead that righteousness that we need to stand before God comes to us by faith. And then it's quoted also in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 38, and talking about rebellion against God. So the way I like to label those is that the New Testament uses this verse that God speaks to Habakkuk by saying that we are not made right with him through our own righteousness, that's Romans, through our onerous religion, that's Galatians, or through our obvious revolt against the Lord. So I thought in the next few weeks before we meet again for Sunday school, I'd take a few minutes and just cover each one of those. Chapter 1 of Romans, verse 17, where Paul says that in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, and that those who by faith are declared to be righteous by God, those will gain life. And then he uses Abraham as an example of that. That Abraham believed, and Abraham came before the law. Abraham believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So there's our midweek focus. This week, think about how Paul uses Habakkuk in the book of Romans. When I read Habakkuk, that wasn't my first reading. I didn't see where Paul was going with that. But now I do, and I'm sure he's glad to know I think he's right. Habakkuk, the way he structures his argument is he lists his complaint of, look around, Lord, look at all the sin that is here. And then God responds with, I'm doing something about it. And the way to survive the coming judgment is by faith to receive the righteousness which is necessary, and you will live. Paul then takes that, quotes it in chapter 1, verse 17 of Romans, and then in chapter 2, he does what Habakkuk did in chapter 1 and points out all the sin that's around, and the way to survive that coming judgment on rebellion against God is by faith. So there you have it, our midweek focus for this week. I miss you, and I look forward to being back together with you in just a few weeks. All right? God bless. Love you. Bye.